Good morning, friends. Oh my goodness. Adjusting just a little bit so this isn't so bad. Oh, guess I adjusted too much. Anyway, good morning, good morning, good morning. Today we're going to talk about how to pivot when things don't go as planned because the plan for this week was to work on digital clutter. And what I realized is I will be adding to my digital load, not necessarily digital clutter. Oh my goodness, I just got back from a walk. It's a little windier than I thought it was going to be. And yes, no makeup. So maybe we'll fix that for tomorrow. Who knows? Anyway, the reason I say that is I showed you the receipts that I have. They're sitting right here. That's why I'm pointing over that way. And then I have all of this paperwork right here that courses I've done and uh, what do I want to call them? Sessions that I've attended. And one of them that I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming podcast is, and I might just make a video podcast. I don't know. I am really trying to decide whether I want to continue with my spoken podcast or if I want to move into video podcasting. So, um, I would love to hear from you if you watch or listen to either one, if you have preference. That being said, with the regular podcast, I have to submit um, a text file so that if someone is hard of hearing or deaf, that they can. Oh, there's a little bug in here. Um, if they're hard of hearing or deaf, that I can give them that written part. YouTube doesn't require that. I can do subtitles, which I haven't done, but can always upgrade to doing them. So I haven't really decided what I'm going to do yet. And I think video is a great format. I don't necessarily have the looks for that people talk about, but that's okay. You know, there are people who are not gorgeous who are also still being successful. That being said, some of the things I'll be talking about, for example, this is about how balance is overrated. And I always say balance is BS. So I do agree with that. But what's really interesting is going through this from the perspective of someone who isn't necessarily task oriented. And for someone who, um, with neurodivergence, we have overwhelm. And I saw somebody yesterday who got so much done, and I was so happy for them and so proud of them. I also know that the next day can be just torture after that because you want to replicate that. Some days you can, some days you can't. And yet, just with this one, it's talking about productivity myths and what's keeping you stuck and what you can do to get over that. And this particular person, the myth they say is that small goals are easier to reach. And um, their correction for that is to set bigger goals and commit to them. Oh, man. Do you know how many times I've tried that? Do you know how many times I've tried setting a bigger goal and trying to chunk it down and all that? It's not the goal for some people. It's they can actually make more progress by not having a goal. Now, depending on your personality type, some people need that big goal. It juices them up. It gets them all excited. That deep personality, ooh, they love that big, monstrous, hairy goal. The S's, the I's, and often the C's, that is not their gig. That is not their gig. Now, the C's can get really stuck in the minutia of creating all the steps to get wherever they want to go. The I's and the S's, because they're not task oriented, they need things chunked down. The thing I loved about my first mentor in blogging was she figured out early on, I would get this glazed over look and she'd go, "Do you need a list of exactly what you need to do?" I'm like, oh my God, yes, I do. And so she started making these lists. And it's funny because she made the lists. She's not a detail person. And I'd be like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And she would have to go back and like, oh, you got to add this step and this step and this step. So I happen to use Trello. I started using Trello to make those lists. I still use some of those lists, tweaked obviously, but I use those lists today to do my podcasts. When I turn my podcast into a blog post, those kind of things, I still use those lists. And it's funny because I always say the I's and the C's are on the opposite sides of the wheel, if you will, of the disc. And both I's and C's need a list, but for very different reasons. The C's love a list. They love making it. They love creating it. They love having it. It's a comfort to them. The I's, you have to be really careful when you give a list to an I. And maybe that was the best part about the fact that the mentor that I had would give me a basic list. And I'd be like, wait a minute, how do I do that? And then she'd be like, oh, like she didn't realize I needed the steps because I didn't intuitively know the steps. So it helped her to be a better coach because she had to find ways to be more detail oriented. But because she would just go figure it out. And being significantly younger than me, she had skills I didn't have. So that's just one thing right there. The I's need the list to survive. And I will tell you, as somebody who's doing trauma therapy right now, I have a lot of trauma in my background. And somebody who's doing trauma therapy right now, what I'm seeing is that what I figured out recently is I've been on high alert pretty much my whole life. What that high alert has kind of created is this situation where most people think I'm incredibly organized. If you know me in my life, the fact that I've carried a planner since I was in my 20s, I always know what everybody in my family is doing, where they are, what's going on. For years, I was way on top of my finances. I knew everything. I was into the minutia. But the thing is, it was because I was on high alert. Because any mistake was grounds for just being destroyed emotionally, mentally, treated like I was incompetent and stupid. And so I was constantly on alert so that I would never make a mistake. Try raising 3 kids and having a household that way. It's just, it's astounding that I've made it this far in life before encountering any kind of physical problems from that. But what I'm finding is, and I was talking to my husband about this last night, when you come out of trauma and when you start to relax and when you stop being on high alert all the time, you forget things. You forget to do things. You forget things that you always had in your head. It almost feels like a kind of dementia because you're letting go of control because you have to. And it's funny because that's not my nature. I love not having a schedule, but I also know, and I will tell you, I do this every day. I make a list. Okay. And I always say, people are like, when they see my list, they're like, you're so organized. And I'm like, no, I'm actually not. I spend every day writing down little snippets that my brain gives me. And I was like, oh, I don't want to forget that. Oh, I don't want to forget that. But that's how that clutter just kind of piles up, right? And then I go back and I find something like this. And what I realize is that I don't live by other people's means. a lot of people who are productivity experts, who are efficiency experts, who are um, even decluttering experts, those people are what, when I was with Fly Lady, she called them born organized. What I would say in DISC are detail oriented people. I'm not that. I can be, but like when we talk about the DISC stuff, when you have, everyone has the capacity to be something that quote they're not. So, for example, one of my favorite examples of this is what I call high D moms. High D moms are not, um, they're not warm and fuzzy. Okay. That's just not them. And I've dealt with so many of them. And there was a time when I first started doing this work that I thought those women were uncaring because they weren't warm and fuzzy and snuggly and cuddly and all that. What I have since learned through some amazing clients is, I remember saying with one client, you're not the type of mom who's going to have a movie day. Like if it's bad weather, you're not going to have movie day with your kids and make hot chocolate. She's like, oh God, no. She's like, I'll make them hot chocolate. They just have to go outside on the patio to drink it, just something like that. And that can sound really cold and callous to somebody, but that's not how she was at all. She was happy to make her kids hot chocolate. They just had to go outside to drink it because she knew them at the time. They were, very young. And she's like, I know they're going to spill it and I don't want to clean up the mess. I'll hose it down, but I don't want to clean it up in the house. Fair. Several of my clients, when their kids go to bed, the last thing they want is to snuggle up on the couch with their spouse because they've been touched all day. And that's not something that they like. They'll do it. They'll put up with it. They'll deal with it. That doesn't mean they don't love their kids. Because I'm going to tell you, if you want to see somebody fight for their kid, if they need something, you will never see anybody more dedicated to fighting for their kids than a high D mom. They adore their children. They just don't adore them necessarily in the way we're used to. But give them a goal, they're amazing. Like they may be the ones to take their kids hiking, and doing stuff like that. That doesn't make them a bad mom. It makes them a different kind of mom. The thing is, we do have to sometimes slow them down and say, hey, take a breath, hang out with your kids for a little while. The dishes will still be there. That's a hard thing for the task-oriented moms. I remember talking to a mom once, and we were trying to explain the difference between a task-oriented mom and a people-oriented mom. And I said, let me give you an example. And I think this is a great one. So it is, let's say there was a hot air balloon going over your house, right? And you're in the middle of cooking dinner. If your kids come running in going, mommy, 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 there's a hot air balloon. Come outside and watch the balloon with us. What are you going to do? The task-oriented mom is going to be like, I'm cooking dinner. I can't just stop in the middle of cooking dinner. Where the non-task-oriented mom, somebody like me, I'm like, I am turning off all those burners. Let's go see this thing. And sometimes you have to decide which thing you're going to, which things are important. What's your memory? What's your child's memory going to be? Because you had planned out how to make dinner and all that and get everything done. Now, if you've got a bunch of stuff to do, you might have to say, oh gosh, I'd really love to do that. But you've got ballet and you've got soccer and you've got this and you've got that. And if I go out there with you, we're either going to have to skip dinner or you're going to be late to that. That's explaining something to a child. If there's nothing special on the schedule, you might go, okay, all I'm going to do is put off dinner for a half an hour. I can make that up later, right? So that's where we go with things like that. Um, but that is, you know, that's the difference between people. And we've talked about being creative. It's the same thing with your creative time. Sometimes you have to give your creative time up. It happens. We've all been there. But sometimes we get so overwhelmed with all the tasks to do, or all the things to do, or all the people to take care of, we don't carve that out for ourselves. And I really want you to be able to do both. And there's all kinds of people that say you can't have it all. And that's true. You can't have it all at one time. What's interesting for me is that when my children were at home, our house was the cleanest it's ever been, because I work best in cooperation, in collaboration with people. So literally every day we would just clean for 15 minutes. We'd pick the toys up. I'd make a list of things that needed to be done. I just kind of look around the house and go, okay, it'd be really nice if we do this, 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 and this. And I'd make a list of, 6 or 8 things, age appropriate. Certain kids weren't allowed to do certain things at certain age. You had to be a certain age to clean a toilet in my house because it's one of my things, but at 3 years old, my youngest child was running a vacuum sweeper because he liked it back in the day. He thought it was cool. It was like being a big people. So did he do an immaculate job? No, but did it look better than when he started? Absolutely. And that's what we would do for 15 minutes. We'd turn on some music. We'd set a timer. Everybody cleaned. And then we would do something fun, which I enjoyed as much as my kids. So there were days they came to me and they're like, can we get started on the cleaning so we can go do something fun? Absolutely. If we had planned a day at the amusement park and it was raining, we might have to pivot and do something different. We would find something to do. We belong to our couple museums and we would just change it to a museum day. There's a lot to be said for that. And that's one of these balances overrated things. Talking about goals. Some people need a big, hairy goal. Some people have tried to make the big, hairy goal and they get halfway through and they get stuck. Neurodivergent people do that a lot. I've had clients that get stuck in the middle of rehabbing house, of cleaning out their closet, all of these things. And what happens is, without somebody's encouragement, they never get past it. But it's also finding the right encouragement, which is why, and I'm going to be jumping off here soon, which is why I'm going to offer for the month of June, I am looking for 10 clients to work with for free since I'm moving into the creativity realm. I'm looking for people who have responsibilities they know that they have to do. They find it a bit overwhelming to do that and be creative. And sometimes it's just life in general, things going on around you, health issues, whatever. What I want to do is I want to offer 4 free coaching sessions. And what we're going to do with that is we're actually going to do, if you go to the Moving Toward Better website, there's a discovery call that you can sign up for. And we're going to start with that. It's just a 15-minute call to say, what is it that you want to work on? Do I think I can work with you and help you? And what are the next steps if we're going to do that? So I'm looking for 10 people and I'm actually going to coach them for free. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I will ask for a testimonial when we're done. So everything transparent right there. We're going to talk about how I can help you or what your issues are, if I can help you. We're going to schedule 4 sessions over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And it's going to cost you nothing other than showing up and working through your issues and then giving me a testimonial at the end. And I will guide you with that. If you are open to doing a video one, great. If you're open to doing an audio one, great. If you want to do a written one, great. Any of those will work. So to get started on that, go to the Moving Toward Better website, click Discovery Call, and we'll get started right away. Until then, I will see you tomorrow or I will see you when you schedule your discovery call. And I hope you all have a great day. Love you guys. Bye bye.